The kitchen was a cathedral of chrome stainless steel counters gleaming under surgical lights. Pastry chefs gliding like dancers in crisp white uniforms, each motion precise, rehearsed. And then came the laughter. Not soft, not kind. It started near the prep table at Station 5. One woman covered her mouth to stifle a giggle. Another leaned in with a smirk, whispering, "Is that foil?" All heads turned. There, walking calmly into the prestigious National Bake-Off studio, was Ava, her chestnut hair tied back in a simple bun, sleeves of her tight burgundy top rolled to the elbow, jeans snug around her hips, flour still clinging to one leg. She carried no rolling pin, no imported tools, just a modest, slightly dented cake tin, wrapped in pink floral foil and tied with a faded ribbon. Someone chuckled aloud. Did she get lost on her way to a church picnic? Ava paused for a breath but said nothing. She walked slowly, past rows of meticulously stacked fondant, blowtorches, and piping bags. Her footsteps echoed louder than the whispers behind her. Contestants glanced at one another, their polished spatulas and precision-measured ingredients suddenly feeling like shields. At the center table, a man in a chef's coat muttered, "Amateur hour." His voice wasn't low enough. Ava reached the presentation counter, unwrapped her cake, and placed it gently on the serving platform. No tires, no edible gold. Just soft swirls of buttercream, carefully piped roses, and the scent of lemon and cardamom in the air. No one spoke. They just stared at her cake. At her. Then came the voice. "That can't be serious," said Cassandra. "Last year's finalist. Did she bake that in a toaster? Oven?" A wave of laughter rippled through the room. But Ava, she didn't flinch. She didn't explain. She didn't apologize. She simply adjusted the ribbon around the base, dusted her hands on her jeans, and stepped back. They thought her cake didn't belong here. They laughed. They whispered. They judged her by the way she looked and the way her cake looked. But what they didn't know was what it was made of. And that's what would change everything. Ava Linwood wasn't born into privilege. She was born into a kitchen, not the glamorous kind with steam-fogged windows, chipped ceramic bowls, and the smell of vanilla always in the air. Her grandmother's kitchen, raised in a small, Midwestern town, Ava never knew luxury, but she knew how to sift flour without making a mess. She knew how to tell if a cake was done just by the smell. And she knew how to stretch $10 into enough groceries for 3 meals and a dessert her parents had passed when she was young in accident, sudden and cruel. So it was her grandmother, Miriam, who raised her, a woman who believed that love could be folded into batter and hope could be whipped into icing. Ava learned early that she was different. While the other girls at school had sleepovers and cheer practice, Ava worked nights with her grandmother baking pies for the church fundraiser or cookies for the local shelter. By the time she turned 18, she could bake blindfolded, but she couldn't afford college. So she stayed, waitressed at a roadside diner, paid the bills, baked on the side for birthdays, funerals, anniversaries, anyone who asked. Her cakes didn't look like the glossy creations from TV shows. They weren't wrapped in fondant or sculpted into swans. But when you took a bite, you tasted something you hadn't felt in years. Nostalgia, comfort, home. She always dreamed of opening her own bakery, a place called Humble Crumbs, a place where people didn't have to dress up or use the right fork. Just show up. Just eat. Just feel. But dreams cost money. And money was something Ava never had much of. Worse than the lack of funds were the looks the ones she got whenever she mentioned baking. Professionally. That's sweet, they'd say. Maybe stick to birthday parties. One woman, after tasting her signature strawberry shortcake, said with a tight smile, "Tastes like something from a school bake sale." Still, Ava kept baking every evening after her shift, mixing by hand. No fancy mixers. Just a quiet kitchen, the hum of an old radio, and her grandmother's recipes scribbled in fading ink on yellowed paper. That's what her cakes were made of: flour, sugar, memory. So when a letter from the National Bake-Off showed up with her name on it, a letter she hadn't applied for, she thought it was a mistake. It wasn't. Her neighbor, Ruth, had secretly submitted a sample and entry form. "You'll never believe it," Ruth said, breathless with excitement. "You're in. You're going to compete." Ava stared at the envelope. National Bake-Off. She looked around. Her tiny kitchen peeling paint, the hum of the fridge, a jar of cinnamon with a rubber band around the lid. What was she doing? This wasn't her world. She wasn't trained. She didn't have a sous chef. She didn't own a chef's coat. But in that moment, she heard her grandmother's voice as clearly as if she were standing beside her. Don't you ever let the shine of someone else's kitchen dim the fire in your own. So Ava packed a duffel bag. She took 3 things with her: her grandmother's worn wooden spoon, her handwritten recipe cards, and a quiet resolve to be judged by taste, not by appearances. The envelope sat unopened on Ava's kitchen counter for 2 full days. It was thick, cream-colored, embossed with gold letters, National Bake-Off finalist. Confirmation. She didn't recognize the sender. She hadn't applied, and she certainly hadn't expected anything prestigious to arrive at the rundown cottage she rented behind the diner. On the 3rd day, she finally opened it. Inside was a letter. Polite, formal, congratulating her for qualifying based on a nominated submission and taste sample. It thanked her for her unique flavor profile and invited her to attend the National Bake-Off Championship in Chicago. All expenses paid. Ava's heart sank before it could rise. She didn't send a submission. Who had? That's when her phone rang. Did you get it? Ruth's voice crackled through the receiver. I snuck a slice of your cake into that contest box, your almond honey sponge with lemon glaze. I had to know what they'd say. Ava nearly dropped the phone. You what? She whispered, half laughing, half horrified. Ruth was unapologetic. You've got gold in your hands, girl. You bake like your soul is on fire. I couldn't let the world miss out. Ava reread the invitation, the words blurring behind a rising panic. This wasn't a local bake sale. It was national. The best bakers in the country, trained chefs, culinary school graduates, TV personalities with their own brands. And then there was her baking in a space so small the oven door knocked into the fridge. Her first instinct was to decline. I'm not ready, she whispered to herself. I'm not enough. That night, she pulled out her grandmother's old recipe binder. Tucked inside was a folded note, in faded blue ink. If you ever feel small, remember, even the finest cakes begin in a humble bowl. The world may not see your worth right away. Bake anyway. Ava closed her eyes. The fear didn't go away, but neither did the quiet voice in her chest telling her she had something to prove, not to them judges, not even to Ruth, to herself. So she said yes. She booked a flight, borrowed a rolling suitcase, packed a few clothes, her grandmother's spoon, a bundle of recipe cards, and one last thing, something homemade, of course. A cake. She didn't know how the contest would go. She didn't even know if they'd laugh at her before she had a chance to bake. But she knew one thing: if they were going to judge her, they'd have to taste her first. The city felt like another planet. Chicago's skyline stretched above Ava like a wall of glass and ambition. The hotel hosting the bake-off, a sleek tower with gold accents and a revolving door that spun too fast, looked more like a corporate palace than a place where cakes were made. Ava stepped out of her taxi, tight jeans hugging her legs, her fitted white cardigan clinging slightly to her frame in the autumn wind. She clutched her worn leather duffel in one hand and, in the other, a cooler with her carefully wrapped cake inside. She walked toward the entrance. A valet raised his eyebrow at her foil-covered tin. Inside, the lobby buzzed with contestants checking in, tall, poised men and women in crisp branded chef jackets, dragging silver suitcases behind them, whispering in technical terms Ava didn't understand. She stood in line, behind a woman adjusting her starched collar who casually said to the man. Beside her, I heard the judges hate rustic. If it's not sculpted, it's trash. Ava shifted her weight, gripping the handle of her cake cooler a little tighter. She was already out of place, and she hadn't even made it to the kitchen. At the check-in table, a young assistant in a headset scanned Ava's paperwork. His eyes landed on her clothing, her lack of equipment, her homemade appearance. "Are you press?" He asked cautiously. "No," Ava replied, her voice calm. "I'm competing." His mouth opened slightly. "Right. Of course. Sorry." He handed her a badge that read Contestant 14, Ava Linwood. She walked to the elevator and pressed the button to the competition floor. The doors opened to a massive culinary studio, polished marble floors, dozens of prep stations, gleaming under LED lights, each one pre-stocked with tools Ava had never seen before. Ava stepped in, suddenly aware of her reflection in the glass wall tight jeans, fitted knit top, no makeup, hair pulled back in a simple knot. A couple of contestants turned. One of them, a tall, immaculately dressed woman with flawless eyeliner, snorted softly. "She's cute," she said to the man beside her. "Maybe she thinks this is a county fair." Ava heard it, but she didn't look back. She walked to her assigned station, 14. Cold, perfect, clinical. She unzipped her duffel and pulled out her grandmother's wooden spoon, placing it gently on the counter. Next came the handwritten recipe cards, edges frayed, corners curled, and finally, her cake, wrapped in floral foil, tied with the same ribbon she'd used for local church bake sales since she was 17. The contrast was almost laughable. Every other table glistened with digital scales, imported vanilla, sugar airbrush guns. Ava had none of it. She had instinct, memory, heart. And that, in this sterile arena of culinary perfection, made her dangerous, even if no one saw it. Yet, the preparation phase was supposed to be simple. A practice round. Hour to get familiar with the space, test the ovens, adjust to the equipment. But for Ava, it felt like being dropped into a science lab with nothing but instinct and an old wooden spoon. Contestants unpacked their kits like surgeons, rows of calibrated measuring tools, blowtorches, molecular sifters, imported mixers that made no noise at all. Station by station, they claimed their territory. Ava pulled out 3 bowls, a whisk with a slightly bent wire, and a hand towel stitched by her grandmother. Her wooden spoon looked small against the steel countertop. A young assistant passed by her station, paused, and pointed. "Where's your sugar thermometer?" he asked. "I don't have one," Ava replied softly. The assistant blinked. "Okay, but how will you know when your syrup hits softball stage?" Ava smiled gently. "I'll know." He walked away, unconvinced. The head judge, a tall man with sharp features and a sharper tongue, watched the contestants through narrowed eyes. He scribbled something in his notebook when he looked at Ava. She saw. She said nothing. "Begin your test." Bakes. Oven doors slammed. "Open!" Timers beeped. Blades spun. The room roared to life like a machine made of sugar and ambition. Ava moved slower. She didn't rush. Her fingers moved through the ingredients like a ritual, measuring not by numbers, but by memory. Then came the first problem. Her oven glitched. The preheat light blinked twice, then shut off. She raised her hand. No one came. She looked at the control panel, tried again. Nothing. No one was going to save her. So she did what she knew how to do. She turned the dial, manually, adjusted the settings by feel, opened the door, let the heat hit her face. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. She stirred her batter in steady circles. Not a sound in her station, just the soft scrape of the spoon against the bowl and the rhythm of breath in her chest. The whispers returned. She doesn't even have gloves. Is that handwriting on her recipe card? Where did they find her? Ava ignored it all. She poured the batter into the pan, smoothed the top with the back of her spoon, and slid it into the oven, hoping not that it would impress them, but that it would survive. By the end of the second day, Ava felt the walls closing in. The kitchen wasn't just cold because of the temperature, it was the silence that wrapped around her. Like a storm cloud. The kind of silence that follows you down a hallway and waits just long enough for you to pass before it fills with whispers. They weren't subtle anymore. They didn't even try to hide it. Did you see what she brought for icing? One girl said, laughing near the break table. A mason jar. I thought it was soup. Another chimed in. I'm sure it's adorable where she's from. Barn weddings and pies in windows. Every word hit a nerve Ava didn't know was still raw. At lunch, she sat alone. Not one person asked her to join their table. No one even made eye contact. She wasn't a threat. She wasn't competition. She was something worse. An outsider. Even the kitchen. Staff had stopped offering help. One intern accidentally knocked over her ingredient bin and didn't even apologize. He just walked away. Ava bent down in silence, gathering spilled flour with her hands. The head judge passed by. He saw. He didn't stop. That evening, as the contestants gathered for a scheduled Q&A with the judging panel, Cassandra took the spotlight. Polished, confident, cruel in the quietest way. She glanced at Ava and said with a sweet smile, I think it's lovely when home bakers try their best. It's cute. Like a child performing at a talent show. The room chuckled. Ava didn't say a word. She just kept her hands folded on her lap, thumb running slowly along the edge of her grandmother's recipe card. But inside she was unraveling. Later that night, she stood in her hotel room, lights off, cake cooler sitting untouched in the corner. She stared at her reflection in the window tight-fitted cardigan, flower-streaked jeans, and eyes full of doubt. Her phone buzzed. It was a photo from Ruth. Her old neighbor had baked Ava's peanut butter swirl muffins and captioned it, not as good as yours, but I'm trying. Ava smiled weakly. Then her eyes welled with tears. She picked up her phone, scrolled through contacts, and hovered over one name, Grandma M. The number was still saved, though it hadn't worked in years. She pressed it. Anyway, the call didn't go through. She sat on the edge of the bed, quiet tears slipping down her cheeks. I don't belong here, she whispered to no one. I should have never come. But then there was a knock on the door. Soft, hesitant. She opened it, expecting a staff member or a mistake. Instead, it was a young kitchen assistant, maybe 19, nervous with flour on his apron. Hey, he said, quietly. I just wanted to say, during rehearsal yesterday, I tried your lemon buttercream. Ava blinked, confused. He looked down, then back at her. It was the best thing I've tasted all year. Like something my mom used to make. He shifted, awkwardly. That's all. I just wanted you to know. And then he walked away. Just like that. Ava stood in the doorway, speechless. She looked back at her cake cooler, at her spoon, at her grandmother's recipe cards. And for the first time in 2 days, she didn't feel completely alone. That night, the silence in Ava's hotel room felt different. It wasn't heavy anymore. It wasn't hollow. It felt like a pause, like something was about to shift. She sat at the desk, the city lights flickering outside her window, and laid out her recipe card. Like old friends returning after a long absence. Her fingers brushed over the smudged ink of her grandmother's handwriting notes written in the margins in tiny loops. Always trust your nose. If the frosting doesn't look right, taste it. It'll tell you. She baked because it was hers, because it was the one thing in this entire competition that couldn't be taken away. She decided on a final dish, a tribute really. Her grandmother's favorite, rose and cardamom sponge cake with lemon whipped cream and pistachio crumble. No fondant, no sculpted sugar, just flavor, soul, and heart. She baked until nearly dawn, alone, her face flushed from the oven, her fitted cardigan rolled up at the sleeves, tight skirt dusted with powdered sugar. When the cake finally cooled, she looked at it and smiled. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. And that made it beautiful. The next morning, she entered the kitchen quietly. She set down her covered cake and began preparing for presentation. Then, the same young assistant passed by again, this time with 2 cups of coffee. He set one near her. "Station, good luck today," he said softly. She looked at him. "Thank you." No applause. No fanfare. Just a quiet vote of confidence. And that was enough. Judging day. The kitchen no longer buzzed with confidence. It buzzed with nerves. Even the most polished contestants double-checked their fondant edges, adjusted sugar, sculptures, and dabbed sweat from their brows. Ava stood at station 14, calm but focused. She wore the same fitted cardigan, tight skirt, and neat apron. The ribbon in her hair matched the one on her cake box. She hadn't changed a thing, not her tools, not her methods, and certainly not her heart. The head judge paced slowly, clipboard in hand, flanked by 2 assistants. At station 3, Cassandra was ready. Her cake was towering 3 tiers of pristine fondant, hand-painted gold leaves, and spun sugar butterflies frozen mid-flight. "She's definitely winning," someone whispered. The judges approached Ava's station. She lifted the lid of her cake container. Silence followed. No fondant, no glitter, just a simple round sponge, rose-scented, frosted, and lemon-whipped cream, topped with crushed pistachios and edible petals. The head judge raised an eyebrow. "Is this your final dish?" "Yes," Ava said, steady and sure. "It's called Miriam's Garden. It's inspired by my grandmother." He didn't smile. He just picked up a cake knife and cut a slice. The interior was golden, moist, flecked with cardamom. He took a bite. No reaction. Then another bite. Still nothing. The assistants took their own samples. One closed her eyes. The judge put down his fork. "What is that? Flavor?" he asked. "Memory," Ava said, "and rosewater." He looked at her, like he was seeing something he hadn't before. They moved on. Ava exhaled. She didn't know what, they thought, but she had done what she came to do. And as the judges walked away, the head judge glanced back at her and nodded. The finalists stood in a perfect line. 12 contestants, 12 cakes, 12 hearts thudding beneath embroidered chef coats. And then there was Ava, tight-fitted cardigan, flower-dusted skirt, hands clasped quietly in front of her. The silver envelope was handed to the head judge. He opened it slowly. Third place, he announced, Rafael Torres. Applause. Second place, Cassandra Elwood. Cassandra stepped forward, smiling tightly. Only one name remained. The judge paused. To our first place winner, he said, we give this title not to the most extravagant design, but to the cake that reminded us why we started baking in the first place. Ava Linwood for Miriam's Garden. Gasps rippled through the room. Then the applause. Ava stood frozen. Miss Linwood, please join us. She stepped forward, slowly, her foil-wrapped cake in one hand, eyes wide. She walked onto the stage, took the trophy, and spoke. I wasn't supposed to be here. At least, that's how I was made to feel. I had handwritten recipes and a wooden spoon, and a lot of people thought that wasn't enough. She looked at the crowd. But here's the truth. It's not about how polished your cake looks. It's about what it's made of. And mine was made of love, memory, and a little bit of lemon. The spotlight wasn't blinding. It was warm. Ava stood at the center of the stage, trophy in hand, the ribbon from her cake fluttering. Gently. Not one part of her looked like the typical champion. But that was the point. Because what she had done wasn't about image. It was about dignity. As Ava stepped down from the stage, people moved aside. Contestants who had once laughed now nodded silently. Cassandra stood, frozen. Ava passed her, without a smirk or a word. Just a quiet glance and a small nod. Outside, a light. Snow had begun to fall. Ava stepped onto the sidewalk, exhaling a long breath. She texted Ruth, "We won." The reply came, "Of course you did." Ava looked up at the sky and whispered, "We did it." 1 month later, the little shop on Maple Street had a new sign, Humble Crumbs. Below it, baked from memory. Inside, sunlight poured through the window. The smell of brown sugar and roasted almonds filled the air. Behind the counter stood Ava, fitted white blouse, neat apron, hands dusted in flour. People came from miles away to try her rose sponge. She hired kind people others had overlooked. Her first hire? The assistant who brought her coffee. And the cake that won it all? Miriam's Garden now sat in a glass case with a plaque. The cake that reminded the world what real baking tastes like. Ava stood by the door, watching two teenage girls share a slice. One said, "This tastes like something my grandmother used to make." Ava smiled. That was the goal. All along, they laughed at her. Foil-wrapped cake. They judged her outfit, her tools, her silence. But Ava didn't fight back with words. She let her cake speak, and it told the truth. We all judge too. Quickly, sometimes by looks, by background, by silence. But the sweetest things in life, they're often wrapped in the most unexpected packaging. So the next time someone walks into the room looking like they don't belong, don't laugh. Don't whisper. Taste first, judge later. Because the way we treat people, that's the real recipe that defines who we are.